The Tennessee Titans offensive line has struggled through the first week of training camp, but it is not time to panic. I'll explain why on today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast.
You are Locked On Titans, your daily Tennessee Titans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Titans podcast. I am your host, Tyler Rowland. Titans fans, today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Look, as the playoffs end here during the summer, the sports stop sporting like we want them to, but this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. The Tennessee Titans are putting on the pads this week. I'm going to go over what I am looking for most. First, we'll talk about the offensive line and the improvements that need to be made. Then we'll talk about the return of Harold Landry and how that affects the defensive line. And finally, we'll talk about the Titans tight ends who need to be better blockers in this offense. Before I get into all of that, I do want to thank you for making the Locked On Titans podcast your first listen each and every day. Remember, Monday through Friday, Tennessee Titans content all year round, always for free. You're not going to beat that anywhere else. Make sure that you get subscribed, stay subscribed. It's your team every day here on the Locked On Titans podcast. And speaking of every day, shout out to my everydayers out there tuning in Monday through Friday. Couldn't do it without you guys. If you aren't an everydayer, you need to be one. You're not going to beat this content anywhere else. It's why the Locked On Titans podcast has been the number one Tennessee Titans podcast in the world for multiple years running now. Make sure that you throw a thumbs up on the video. Let me know down below what you're looking for when the Titans put the pads on. But with all that being said, we got to talk about this offensive line because one of the big takeaways coming out of Saturday's open practice to the public was the worry about the offensive line. Quite honestly, there were some people panicking. Now, I immediately pushed back on some of the reaction that I was seeing. I think it's obviously a little too early to panic about the offensive line. Number one, this is a brand new offensive line. 4 brand new starters. Right now, you have J.C. Latham, the rookie at left tackle. You have Peter Skoronski at left guard. And those are supposed to be 2 of the best offensive linemen the Titans have. Well, Peter Skoronski is a second-year player, and J.C. Latham is a rookie. So it may take them a little bit of time to perfectly coalesce. You have a new starter at center in Lloyd Cushenberry, signed as a free agent. And then on the right side, you have a guy in Sadiq Charles who's been up and down in his first 4 years. He's not like a certified, guaranteed starter in the NFL. He's kind of on that line of, is this guy a backup? Is this guy a starter? And the Titans are hoping that with the tutelage of with Bill Callahan, that they're going to be able to get Sadiq Charles to the best place he's been in his entire NFL career. But make no mistake, it's been up and down so far. That's why he was a free agent after leaving Washington. And then the Titans have John Ojukwu at right tackle right now with Nicholas Petit-Frere being banged up. And NPF should be joining the team here soon as well. Remember back to the first day of training camp when Brian Callahan advised that Nicholas Petit-Frere would start on the PUP. He said it should only be a couple of days. So hoping to see NPF back in practice. But there's a couple of realities. Number one, like I just mentioned, 4 new starters. It's a brand new offensive line. Number 2, it's a brand new offensive system with brand new coaching all over the place. Number 3, the reality here is that John Ojukwu was never meant to be the starter, and I don't think that John Ojukwu is good enough to be the starter for the Titans. So you're playing at one spot right there where you're not certain if you even have an NFL-level player. No matter the rave reviews we want to hear, I still want to see NPF get that opportunity, and then a guy like Leroy Watson, who's the backup right now at right tackle to John Ojukwu, a guy like Jerron Christian, who was hired. I think the Titans are giving the young guy, John Ojukwu, a chance at right tackle, but you add in the new starters, new players working together, new system, new coaching, a player at right tackle who may not be a player for the NFL anyways. And then the final most important thing is the pads are not on yet. And I talked about this on yesterday's show at the end of the show, but the reality here is the offensive line is going to be at a disadvantage against the defensive line in a non-padded situation. The defensive line is going to be able to move quicker because they're typically better athletes than the offensive line. And the response that the offensive line would have is their power, is their strength. But you got to have the pads on to be able to do a lot of that. You know what I mean? Like, it's going to be hard to take on a defensive lineman who's going full speed at you with no pads on when you're the offensive line. That's just the reality. It's set up for the defensive line to win more. So with the pads on this week, we need to see improvement from the offensive line. Look, I said it on yesterday's show, not time to panic. It is not time to panic. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't have a certain level of concern. There's a difference between a healthy level of concern and outright panic. And I feel like some people have already decided the offensive line is going to be bad. Oh no, same thing as the last 2 years. Here we go again. And I think that is a tad overblown. You're getting a little overzealous, in my opinion, if that's your response to 1 week of training camp without the pads on. But that's why we need to see this offensive line with the pads on. I want to give them a true opportunity to gel together and to be able to play with the physicality that is necessary on the offensive line. So can John Ojukwu at right tackle actually step up and have some good practices? Will Peter Skoronski and J.C. Latham look more dominant together on the left side? Is Lloyd Cushenberry going to be worth the contract the Titans gave him? I think that he will be. I do. And I think that a lot of this is just overblown. And I mentioned it. Look, there are guys on the defensive line who, to me, look like guys who do a little too much. They take advantage of the opportunity. Hey, we know that the O-line doesn't have pads on. We're going to go extra hard and be extra aggressive and extra downhill because we know they don't have the pads on. We're going to make ourselves look good here in practice. Blah, 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 blah. So I think that there's a dose of that out there as well. Arden Key seems like that type of guy. Remember, 7 sacks in practice. I might have had 10. But, well, you know, you're going against Andre Dillard for one, but also the defensive line has a total advantage when there are no pads on. So I really want to see this offensive line bounce back this week when the pads come on. I want to hear some good reports about their ability to keep Levis clean. I want to see the run game get going a little bit. That is really where I want to see some action this week with the pads on, is in that run game. All right, because with the tutelage of Bill Callahan, the Titans should be able to have a good run game schematically and with the talent they have on the offensive line. So I'm not panicking about this O-line yet. I think that's a little too early, but it's fair to have a healthy level of concern. And I want to see what happens this week and the next few weeks after this when the pads come on. That is when we'll really get a good idea of how good or bad this offensive line will be. So I'm excited to see what happens there. Pads coming on, though. I'm looking at more than just the offensive line. Harold Landry set to return. Let's talk about the D-line and how the pads affect them. So we're going to dive into that next. And then, of course, the tight ends and the linebackers are going to be battling now that the pads are on. And I got my eye on the Titans' 2 tight ends for a specific reason. So I'll explain all that. Before I do, though, do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Look, guys, I love sports. I think that's pretty obvious. I love them so much that I never want them to stop. But the reality is the playoffs have pretty much ended. We got the MLB going, but, you know, no basketball, no hockey. And the sports just aren't sporting like we want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app, dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood, like Titans plus 4.5 against the Chicago Bears in week 1. I love that. So this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There is something for everyone every day, all summer long. Head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. It's FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Titans fans, let's continue today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast, talking about what I'm looking for as the Tennessee Titans put the pads on this week. Obviously, want to see the offensive line bounce back from a struggle first week, but with the pads coming on, I think that'll happen. Also, we're supposed to get Harold Landry back at Tennessee Titans practice. I'm going to talk about him and the D-line, and at the end of the show, we'll talk about the tight ends for the Titans and how important they are with the pads on, and match that up with the linebackers as well. But before I continue, do want to thank you guys again for making the Locked On Titans podcast your first listen each and every day, Monday through Friday, Tennessee Titans content all year round, always for free. Make sure that you get subscribed, stay subscribed. It's your team every day here at the Locked On Titans podcast. But looking at Harold Landry, okay, the Titans need him back. I've been worried about the edge rusher position for months now. Like, I've been worried about it for a long time. We were talking about what the Titans can do at edge, free agents that should be available, all of that. But the big thing is getting Harold Landry back out at practice. He was sick, so it wasn't an injury. It's not anything to worry about physically. He was sick, okay? But getting Harold Landry back out there sets things correctly. So at the scrimmage or at the open practice on Saturday, the Titans had Arden Key and Rashad Weaver, which in theory should be your 2 and 3rd edge. Harold Landry at number 1. So need to see Harold Landry back out there looking like himself. I'm getting ready to, next Monday, I am going to put out a new film project on the Tic Tac Titans film channel here on YouTube. If you're not subscribed to that, what are we doing here? You know, do you want to be the smartest Titans fan possible? Do you want to know what they're actually doing out on the field? Do you want to deep dive into these players? You got to subscribe to @Tic Tac Titans here on YouTube for all my film stuff. But after the bye last year, after week 6, Harold Landry was incredible. He was incredible. Back to his old form. Looked fantastic. So if they get that version of Harold Landry in camp, that's obviously going to help a ton, and it's going to help out the offensive line by giving them a true good pass rusher in the NFL to go against on a daily basis. But it helps set everything up more properly so we can see the pecking order of the edge. 2 guys that I have my eye on here. Number 1, Jalen Harrell. The rookie out of Michigan has been impressive throughout the first week of camp, punching balls out and creating turnovers, getting pressure on the quarterback with bull rush and speed to power. He's a guy who we knew already would be a great culture fit. Jim Harbaugh called him the heartbeat of the defense at Michigan, who was the national champions. I hate to say that as a Buckeye, but it's the truth. They deserve that credit. So if Jalen Harrell is a culture fit, he's a guy who's going to be readily available to play on special teams, something that he's going to be more than happy to do. If he can continue to make this impact with the pads on, see, that's the thing. We've heard, he got a sack. And we can extend this to the D-line as well, not even edge. Tavondre Sweat getting a couple of sacks. Jeffrey Simmons, Sebastian Joseph Day, these guys up front. When the pads come on is when the truth comes out, okay? That's what's going to tell the truth, not these, underwear Olympics on underwear Olympics up front. Look, the wide receivers, the cornerbacks, pass coverage, 7-on-7, all of that. Look, without the pads, I think you could still get a very good look. But trench play, you're not going to get a true look, a true understanding until you put those pads on. Okay? So get Harold Landry back in the fold. Set it correctly to where Jalen Harrell, and another guy, Shane Ray. So I made this point on Twitter @Tic Tac Titans. You can follow me there. But I made this point that I've been talking about a free agent signing for the Titans. I wanted a free agent edge rusher to be added to the team. I've talked about Emmanuel Ogbah. I've talked about Carl Lawson. Yannick Ngakoue is not someone who I particularly want, but he is available and out there, a guy who's certainly a good pass rusher. And Denard Wilson seems to like these kind of edgy personalities. Well, Yannick Ngakoue is considered one of the more selfish locker room players that we've seen in the NFL. He only cares about his stats, doesn't give good effort against the run. He just wants to rush the passer and get sacks and make himself look good. All right. Not a huge fan of him personally, but maybe Denard Wilson is. Again, he likes these edgy guys. He maybe thinks he can get the very best out of them. So a big personality sounds like something up Denard Wilson's avenue. So maybe that would be a name they're attracted to. But maybe the Titans don't want any of those guys. Maybe the free agent signing that the Titans are banking on is Shane Ray. Remember, we talked about Shane Ray last week when the Titans brought him in. I talked about him a month ago or so when the Titans worked him out. Was a former first-round pick of the Denver Broncos in 2015. There's a Brian Callahan connection. Callahan was on that staff with Shane Ray. Shane Ray's career never really took off. Last played an NFL game in 2018. Spent some time with the Canadian Football League. Was with the Bills in training camp last year. But his career never really panned out. Look, sometimes people are late bloomers. I was a late bloomer. I didn't get the opportunity to do anything in media until I was 28 years old, even though I went to college for it for multiple years. And it's all I've ever wanted to do since basically puberty showed up and everyone got real tall and I didn't. I basically gave up wanting to play professional sports and decided that I would cover it. So sometimes people are late bloomers, and maybe Shane Ray is a late bloomer. Maybe Shane Ray can be that fourth edge rusher free agent signing that we've been looking for. Maybe that can be him. You know what I mean? So when the pads come on, we're going to know the truth. Shane Ray is an athletic guy. Probably would be easier for him against some of these offensive linemen without the pads on. When the pads come on, how does the edge rusher thing shake out? With Harold Landry back at the top, sets everything in the correct order. Now we can see what we really have down the depth chart and how low they want to go. I thought that they might only keep 5 edge rushers when we did the roster prediction. So maybe they keep 6 now if they like what they see. But I'm really curious to see who takes that edge 2 spot. How does the thing stack down now that we have Harold Landry back at the top? Also on the defensive line, can Sweat repeat his performances recently? You know, that's something that I'm going to be interested in when the offensive line has the ability to anchor a little bit more. They can go against that weight and that power a little bit more because they have the pads on. That's what I'll be looking for. And the backup defensive line. I'm not a big fan of the backup defensive line. Keandre Coburn, Quentin Bohanna, TK McClendon, Marlon Davidson. Just not a huge fan of any of those players as good NFL depth. I do want to see some churn on the interior defensive line. I'd like to see that, but that churn probably isn't something that's going to happen until the Titans get a look at these guys in pads. Okay, so really excited to see who gets that edge 2 spot. Harold Landry back in the fold. The interior defensive line, how do they look at with pads on against the offensive line with pads on? Those are positions that we still don't have great answers on that I'm ready to start getting some information about. You know what I mean? But that's not it. We talked O-line, we talked D-line. Now I want to talk about the tight ends and the linebackers, specifically those tight ends. Going to need Chig Okonkwo and Josh Whyle to really step it up, and we're going to see if they've made that jump when the pads come on. So we'll talk about that now. Before we do, though, do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Look, Game Time is the best place to buy tickets, period. No doubt about it. No questions asked. My favorite site to buy tickets. I've bought football, basketball, baseball, WNBA, concert tickets. I mean, everything on Game Time. They have everything you need. And it's summer, folks. It's time to go to an MLB game. It's the perfect time of year. All right. Look, Game Time, best features, all-in prices. You get a view from your seat. You get the Game Time guarantee, so you know that you're getting the lowest price for your tickets no matter what. I mean, I say it every single time I do one of these reads, but you're not going to beat the features that Game Time has. They have the best features in the industry. So make sure that you take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Titans fans, let's cap off today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast. We talked about the offensive line bouncing back when the pads come on. We talk about Harold Landry being back out at practice and the pads coming on and what it means for the defensive line. Now I want to talk about the tight ends and also a little bit about the linebackers as well. But before I get into it, thank you again for making the Locked On Titans podcast your first listen each and every day. Now for your second listen, make sure you check out Locked On Sports Today. Locked On Sports Today is the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. It's literally streaming 24/7. Throw it on, pay attention, throw it on to some background noise. There's no need to watch ESPN or Fox Sports 1 and all their terrible argument shows anymore. Throw on quality sports content all day long with Locked On Sports Today. Again, 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and it's also on Amazon Fire TV as well. But with that being said, we talk about the offensive line when we talk about blocking, but really what I want to see is Josh Whyle and Chig Okonkwo. So Josh Whyle last year, far too skinny, not a good enough blocker, was more seen as a pass matchup guy. Chig Okonkwo, no matter how much hype that we have for Chig, I love Chig Okonkwo. I've always been a Chig Okonkwo guy. No matter how much hype we have, he just has not been a great blocker in his first 2 years. But to be honest, that was to be expected because he's a smaller, undersized tight end who's a great athlete. He's kind of a tweener between a tight end and a wide receiver. So I think the expectation always was that Chig Okonkwo was never going to be an elite blocker. But they both have to be better. If those are going to be the top two tight ends in this offense, and the Titans are going to run a ton of 3 wide receiver sets, which is the expectation. It's what we've seen so far. It's what you would expect to get from Brian Callahan and his offenses. If the Titans are going to play in a lot more 3 wide receiver, that means they're only going to have 1 tight end on the field. And if they're only going to have 1 tight end on the field, that player has to be able to block. They have to. They absolutely have to. You can't do this thing where Nick Van Ette, like the Titans did the last few years with Jeff Swaim and with Trevon Wesco, where it's like, oh, yeah, this tight end's in. He can't catch, so he's going to block. Nick Van Ette is a better pass catcher than both those players, Jeff Swaim and Trevon Wesco. So it gives the Titans a little more versatility. But the Titans need to utilize Josh Whyle and Chig Okonkwo. They're the most talented tight ends they have on the roster. And those guys have to do their part by being a suitable blocker. They have to be. They have to be better at blocking if the Titans offense is going to be able to function. Now, that's why a lot of people have been super hype about Josh Whyle, because Josh Whyle has put on weight. He looks bigger, he looks stronger, and he has the prototypical build for a tight end in the Brian Callahan offense. He can be a matchup nightmare in the pass because he's got his height and his jumping ability, but, he can also be big enough to be that blocker and be that tight end that when there's 3 wide receivers on the field, you still don't know, are the Titans going to run? Are the Titans going to pass with Josh Whyle on the field? With Chig Okonkwo, good chance that it's a pass. You're going to be able to catch some people sleeping and all that. That's how you play the game, of course. But it would make more sense that way. Nick Van Ette, probably a run. It just tips the hand a little too much. Josh Whyle is the perfect in-between of those 2 players. He's the perfect mesh of receiving skills and body size, giving him the ability to be a blocker. Namaste. But that's what I'm looking for when these pads come on. Has Josh Whyle's weight increase allowed him to be a better blocker? Is Chig Okonkwo in year 3 at least improved? Did he at least improve? That's critical to me. So that's what I'm looking for. And on the flip side of that, the linebackers. So Kenneth Murray has looked good so far. He has. I wasn't a big fan of the Kenneth Murray signing, but he has looked good so far the first week of camp. Now we put the pads on, which should help Kenneth Murray in theory because he's an incredibly physical player. But does that change the way that he operates in coverage? You know what I mean? And we know we got Dr. Gibby there, but what about after those guys? Who's going to step up now with the pads on? Cedric Gray, the rookie. Otis Reese, who's a fan favorite, who a lot of people think was going to take a jump this year. James Williams, the high-level recruit out of Miami, was a 5-star prospect in high school. transitioning from safety to linebacker, just had a baby. Congratulations, James Williams. But who out of that young group of linebackers is going to put the pads on and take the step forward to be the Titans' number 3 linebacker? Like, all of these players that we were excited about, we are going to get our answers now with the pads on. So I'm looking at, again, the offensive line. Can they bounce back? The defensive line. How do things shake out with the depth? And then can the tight ends be better blockers than last year? Which of the young linebackers will step up? That's what I'm looking for with the pads coming on. What are you looking for with the pads coming on for the Titans? Another practice on Tuesday morning for the Titans. I'll be here with you guys tomorrow to break it all down. So make sure that you get subscribed, stay subscribed, throw a thumbs up on the video. Let me know what you're watching for with the pads on down below. That is going to do it for me today, folks. As always, I am your host, Tyler Rowland, and this was Locked On Titans.